Hi, I'm Rick Dior, and welcome to part 4 of my Snare Drum of the Week series. And today we're going to talk about the legendary Gladstone Snare Drum. So this right here is a Lang Gladstone drum. So you could call it a replica. The original Gladstone drums were made way back in the 1940s through the 50s, I believe. Maybe he made some into the 60s, but those drums were legendary, and there's so few of them left. Really, there were some gold-plated ones, and he would make them for friends, and people would buy them probably very cheaply back then. And an original Gladstone drum right now will run you into the many thousands of dollars. So when Arnie Lang bought the rights to reproduce these, and I found out about it, I jumped at the chance to get one because I knew I'd be able to probably afford it. Now, this particular drum was about $1,200 back in the early 2000s. And even these drums now are extremely expensive, probably in the $4,000, maybe $3,000 range. And it's pretty much identical to the original drum. All the hardware, everything is exactly the same. So I did a video on this drum about 3 years ago, very extensive. So we're going to jump to that entire video in a minute. And throughout this series, which is going to last a few years, the drums that I've already covered in videos, we're going to do that. We'll jump back to those videos because, I put a lot of effort into them, and no sense making the same video twice. But I'll always do a little introduction like this. So this drum is a stave construction, 6.5 by 14-inch snare. All right, we'll talk a little about this drum really quickly, and then you'll hear the redundancy again when I show you the video. The drum was very notable for its innovations back in the day. Billy Gladstone, as well as being one of the greatest snare drummers who ever lived, was also a great inventor. He invented lots of different things, not just percussion stuff, but all kinds of things. If you want to find out about that, you can go online. But this drum had many innovations, one of them being that you could tune the top and the bottom head from the top with this special key here, and I'll show it to you. So you'll see on the video coming up here how that unscrews, that little star key there, and then you can just do it everything from the top. And all the little adjustments on the drum can be made with that one key. The drum was also outfitted for gut snares, as this one is. I do have the regular snares on here, as I will in the video. And in the video, I'll compare it to, and I'll play it on the drum set, I'll compare it to an old Gretsch snare drum. Now, for a while, Gretsch basically distributed the Gladstone drums. They were called the Gretsch Gladstone drums. So you might find one of those too. And of course, they're also very valuable. But the drum I'll be comparing against is a Centennial snare from 1983 with a Jasper shell, same size, which is a great jazz snare drum. So I've used this drum both for classical snare drumming when I change the snares, and drum set snare drumming is fantastic for both. We'll show you a few little things here that I might have skipped in the other video. I'm not sure that I did, but he would always put a nameplate on here. So this is the nameplate that they made for me. And we'll give you a little close-up tour, and we'll give you another one when you see the other video, of course. Now, briefly, I don't know if I talked about this in the video, but Arnie Lang was just a wonderful guy, known to a lot of people as Morris Lang, played with the New York Philharmonic for many, many years. I first met him when I was about 20 years old, maybe 21. My first Broadway tour, which was Chorus Line, I bought a set of Saito bells from him, these Japanese bells that he was distributing, and went down to his apartment way downtown New York. I think he lived in Soho maybe, or the Village, but it was down there. And hung out with him for a few hours. He told me a bunch of stories, and I'd seen him play for years with the Philharmonic. And then after that, we kind of kept in touch. He was very close friends with a friend of mine, Artie Lieberman, and they went way back. So I knew quite a bit about him, and I knew him personally, and he was just a really good guy that was really into these drums and basically built many of them. So you can probably go on Reverb or eBay and find some used ones from time to time if you're willing to shell out the cash. So now we'll go on to the original video here, and I hope you enjoy this, and we'll see you next time. Hi, I'm Rick Dior, and today I'd like to show you a really special snare drum. And this is a Lang Gladstone snare drum that was made for me many years ago. And it's not an original Gladstone drum. So if those of you who don't know, Billy Gladstone's probably one of the greatest snare drummers who ever lived. He taught my teacher, Joe Morello, several lessons, as well as many, many other great drummers. And he played at Radio City Music Hall. And for those who saw him, you know, they have said, in things that I've read, and including Joe, to me personally, said that he was just an amazing player with incredible technique and great sensitivity and great musicality. He influenced Buddy Rich heavily as far as snare drum technique, as well as Joe Morello. So two of the greatest technicians ever. He was basically their mentor in that way. He was also a brilliant inventor. He held patents on many different things, not just drums, but other things as well. And there's lots of stuff online that you can read about him. There's even books about him and lots of articles too in certain drum magazines like Not So Modern Drummer and Modern Drummer and many other magazines that you can find a lot of information online. Anyway, an original Gladstone drum is very, very valuable these days. I remember my friend Barry Greenspan, Drummers World, had a Gladstone drum that would sit on the shelf, and every time I went in there, which sometimes was every day, I would just look at it on the shelf and ask Barry if he wanted to sell it, and he always told me, no, I'm not selling it. I should ask him again now. But in the meantime, I had one of these made, and I wanted sort of a different shell, so I had a stave shell made. I'm really fond of stave drums. I have a whole drum set of these that were made for me by Doc Sweeney. And it's a different sound. It's a drier sound. The shells are thicker. It's a very articulate sound. And I use this drum both for playing drum set and classical. So I switch the snares on and off, and more about that in a second. But first, let's talk about this drum. Arnie would make drums to spec. In other words, he would have these parts made. He had the rights to do all this. Now, the Gladstone hardware is extremely unique. So, first of all, the most unique thing are these lugs and the tension rods. So, each drum came with a key that you would unscrew, and it would, just like the Gretsch holder, it would screw right onto the drum. So it was always there. And it was a tri-key, in other words, 3 ends. One end did the top head, the other end did the bottom head, all from the top now. You don't need to turn it over to tune it. And the third end did both at the same time, which is really amazing. The only issue was, over time, a lot of this system would strip out. And changing a head is a pain in the neck, I just got to tell you. So you got to be really careful when you do this. Keep it well lubricated. And you can strip out a lug, and if that happens, it's expensive to get a new one. All right? So this drum also has some other really cool features, one being this snare butt plate. And with this butt plate, you can, I'm going to show you a close view of it here, but with this butt plate, you can actually put gut snares on individual wires. I'm going to use my other camera here and show you a close-up. So you see these holes here? They're made to put thin gut or individual strands of wire in. And it came with a tool that, again, screws into the shell, which is very smart, so you don't lose it. And this is a hex key. So that hex key screws into here, and you can lock your wires in there. Each bolt controls 2 wires. So there's a little piece of metal in there. So there's 6 of these total, 2 on top, 2 on bottom. And when I have individual strands of gut, I can get 12 strands of gut, which, as all of you know, that's what I always use, who watch my other rudimental videos, on here. Okay, they're not on here right now because my real good gut is on my old Ludwig snare that I'm doing all these Nord videos with. So that's really great to have that opportunity. It's very, very intelligent design. Now, on the other end, you have this throw-off that was a Gladstone special. Very smooth. The only thing about it is it does hit the rim with a click. So if that bothers you, you can put a little piece of moleskin here, and that won't do that. It's very smooth. It's tough. It is a little thin. I've not had it break. Of course, I've only owned one of these. And next to it is this really nice muffler control. And the mufflers are ingenious. I'm going to show you this. So if you look at that little muffler there, it's very thin, and it worked on sort of a system where, let me see if I can find, there it is. So it's a little wheel in there, and that turns this, and there's sponge on top. Sorry about the snare sound here when I'm talking. Okay. Now, that will break. So I have seen these drums where that system will break down, and then you'll have to re-weld it. Not a big deal. Of course, I don't use a lot of internal muffling, but it's a pretty cool idea because it has numbers on here. Hopefully you can see those, where if you do use internal muffling, you can set it and retain that setting. And then this is where the key screws in, and it does say Gladstone, but also Lang percussion there. Now let's look at the shell. So, as with most staff shells, except for Doc Sweeney, these are very thick, like a sonar thickness almost. But this drum is very well put together. Not sure where he got the shell. It is rosewood and maple, curly maple. Okay, that's what I wanted. Thought it would look neat, and it does look pretty nice. Okay, we're going to turn this off now. I'm going to play this for you real quick. It's probably going to distort a little. I won't play too hard. So I have this drum tuned really tight because I was just using it on a little bit of a funk session I was doing, and it sounded great. But what I'm going to do here in a minute, I'm going to stick it on this jazz kit that I have set up, and I'm going to let you hear it as compared to a Gretsch wood drum, because a stave snare drum sounds different than any other kind of wooden snare drum, really. Even if you have a steam bent drum, in other words, like an old Radio King or a newer Doc Sweeney drum that's steam bent, or a Craviato, they're great, all great drums. But a stave drum has a different sound. It's much drier and you get a much more pronounced attack when you play, as you'll see. Now, that makes this also great for a classical snare drum. So when I put gut snares on there, or regular black swamp snares, or any other kind of snare system on there that's geared towards orchestral music. So it'll be a combination of wire, no curly snares, coated cable, things like that. This drum sounds tremendous for that too. So we'll bring this over to the drum set and show you what it sounds like. So we're here at the drum set. This is a set of Gretsch Centennials that I use a lot. And I have the Gretsch Snare Drum that goes with this kit down there. I'll put that up in a minute so you can hear the difference. And I'll just play a little for you so you can hear this Gladstone drum. So as you can see, this drum's got a lot of impact, and that's partly due, or mostly due, to the stave shell. It's got killer rim shots. So what I'm going to do now is tune this up, because I consider that kind of a medium low tuning for this particular drum. And what you do with a Gladstone is, if you want to bring both heads up like I described before, there's a special part of this tri-key you use. So we're going to do that first. We'll bring both heads up, and then I'll just bring the top head up. And you'll notice I don't have to turn the drum over because the lugs all operate from the top. All right, and now what I'm going to do is just get the top to come up. Now, when you do that, it's the biggest part of this key that just does the top. All right, so if you look inside it, it looks like a socket wrench. It's very ingenious, really. Now, other companies have copied this, and it is a complicated thing, like I said, when you change the heads. So now you hear the difference. Now, this is the only internal muffler that I own that I actually use, because you could put it on there so gently, and it has these sponge cups that barely touch the head, so it's not fighting you when you play it down. So I did have it on there a little. Now I'm going to take it off. Really killer rim shot at this tuning, which is pretty high. So it's just incredibly powerful. Too much for this kit, really. It's not really a jazz drum, but I do use it sometimes when I need kind of almost that Roy Haynes kind of tight, snappy sound. So let's put this Gretsch drum up, and you'll see the difference right away, okay? Once again, this has regular curly snares on there. I'm going to turn it off here. It's a very heavy drum, as you can imagine. As is this Gretsch drum, because of the heavy hardware. So this is a Jasper shell. It's the same depth, but it does have a calf head on it. So one thing you'll notice right away, the darkness of the drum really matches these old K cymbals of this Gretsch, where the timbre of that drum doesn't really quite match these cymbals of the Gladstone. That's kind of a good lesson to learn. You know, I always choose my snare drums with my cymbals. So I'll go with a darker sounding snare drum with a calf head, but also the Gretsch snares, especially the deep ones, have a very dark sound. It's not like the brass drums that they make, you know, the chrome over brass drums. So it's definitely a sound, and it blends great with the old Ks. So both great snare drums, but very, very different in sound. And no matter what you do with a drum like that Gladstone, it's going to be difficult to get it to sound like a drum like this because of that stave shell. Of course, the opposite is true too. If you want like a great kind of funk backbeat sound, you're not going to necessarily get it out of that Gretsch drum, but you will certainly get it out of this, okay? But I think this is the more versatile drum, the Gladstone drum, because you can tune it low, and if I did put a calf head on here, that would darken it up just a bit. So I'll just play a little for you, and we'll call it a day.